existed in the interior of Hungary, a settled although hidden belief in the doctrines of the metempsychosis. Of the doctrines themselves, that is, of their falsity or of their probability, I say nothing. I assert, however, that much of our incredulity, as Labrière says, of all of our unhappiness, vient de ne pouvoir être so. This is French, I don't know French, so I'm sorry. But that means, Mercier in l'an 2004, Saint 40. I'm so sorry for all the French people that needs to listen to this. Seriously maintains the doctrines of metempsychosis, and Disraeli says that no system is so simple and so little repugnant to the understanding. Colonel Ethan Allan, the Green Mountain Boy, is also said to have been a serious metempsychosist. The novel Lan 2440, the year 2440, by French author Louis-Sébastien Mercier, describes a utopian future. Isaac Disraeli was a British writer. The words here are taken from his Curiosities of Literature. Ethan Allan was a hero of the War of American Independence. The quotation here means, comes of being unable to be alone, and is taken from the essays known as La Caractère by Jean de la Bruyère. Okay. It'll be a long video. The families of Berlifitzing and Metzengerstein had been a variance for centuries. Never before was two houses so illustrious, mutually embittered by hostilities so deadly. The origin of this enmity seems to be found in the words of an ancient prophecy. A lofty name shall have a fearful fall when, as the rider over his horse, the mortality of Metzengerstein shall triumph. Why I read it like in a French accent? Over the immortality of Berlifitzing. To be sure, the words themselves had little or no meaning, but more trivial causes have given rise, and that not long while ago, to consequences equally eventful. Besides, these states, which were contiguous, had long exercised a rival influence in the affairs of a busy government. Moreover, near neighbors are seldom friends, and the inhabitants of the castle Berlifitzing might look from the lofty buttresses into the very windows of the palace Metzengerstein. Least of all, at the more than feudal magnificence thus discovered, a tendency to allay the irritable feelings of the less ancient and less wealthy Berlifitzings. What wonder then that the words, however silly, of that prediction should have succeeded in setting and keeping at variance two families already predisposed to quarrel by every instigation of hereditary jealousy. The prophecy seemed to imply, if it implied anything, a final triumph on the part of the already more powerful house, and was of course remembered with more bitter animosity by the weaker and less influential. William Count Berlifitzing, although loftily descended, was at the epoch of this narrative an infirm and doting old man, remarkable for nothing but an inordinate and inveterate personal antipathy to the family of his rival, and so passionate a love of horses, and Upon the succession of a proprietor so young, with a character so well known, to a fortune so unparalleled, little speculation was afloat in regard to his probable course of conduct. And indeed, for the space of 3 days, the behaviour of the Herod and fairly surpassed the expectation of his most enthusiastic admirers. Shameful debaucheries, flagrant treacheries, unheard of atrocities, gave his trembling vassals quickly to understand that no servile submission on their part, no punctilious of conscience on his own, were thenceforward to prove any security against the remorseless fang of a petty Caligula. It's really hard to understand for me. On the night of the 4th days, the stables of the castle Berlifitzing were discovered to be on fire, and the unanimous opinion of the neighbourhood added the crime of the incendiary to the already hideous list of the baron's misdemeanours and enormities. But during the tumult occasioned by this occurrence, the young nobleman himself sat apparently buried in meditation in a vast and desolate upper apartment of the family palace of Metzengerstein. The rich, although faded tapestry hangings which swung gloomily upon the walls represented the shadowy and majestic forms of 1,000 illustrious ancestors. Here, richer-minded priests and pontifical dignitaries familiarly seated with the autocrat and the sovereign, put a veto on the wishes of a temporal king, or restrained with the fiat of papal supremacy the rebellious sceptre of the arch-enemy. There, the dark, tall statues of the Princes Metzengerstein, their muscular workhorses plunging over the carcasses of fallen foes, startled the steadiest nerves with their vigorous expression. And here again, the voluptuous and swan-like figures of the dames of days gone by floated away in the mazes of an unreal dance to the strains of imaginary melody. But as the Baron listened, or affected to listen, to the gradually increasing uproar in the stable of Berlifitzing, or perhaps pondered upon some more novel, some more decided act of audacity, his eyes were turned unwittingly to the figure of an enormous and unnaturally coloured horse, represented in the tapestry as belonging to a sergeant and jester of the family of his rival. The horse itself, in the foreground of the design, stood motionless and statue-like, while farther back, its discomfited rider perished by the dagger of a Metzengerstein. On Frederick's lips arose a fiendish expression as he became aware of the direction which his glance had, without his consciousness, assumed. Yet it did not remove it. On the contrary, it could by no means account for the overwhelming anxiety which appeared falling like a pall upon his senses. It was with difficulty that he reconciled his dreamy and incoherent feelings with the certainty of being awake. The longer he gazed, the more absorbing became the spell, the more impossible did it appear that he could ever withdraw his glance from the fascination of the tapestry. But the tumult, without becoming suddenly more violent, with a compulsory exertion, it property, sir," replied one of the equerries, "unless he is claimed by no other owner. We caught him flying, all smoking and foaming with rage, from the burning stables of the castle Berlifitzing. Supposing him to have belonged to the old constat of foreign horses, we let him back as an estate, but the grooms there disclaim any title to the creator, which is strange, since he bears evident marks of having made a narrow escape from the flames. The letter WVB are also branded very distinctly on his forehead," interrupted a second equerry. "I suppose them, of course, to be the initial of William von Berlifitzing, but all at the castle are positive in denying any knowledge of the horse." "Extremely singular," said the young baron with a musing air, and apparently unconscious of the meaning of these words. "He is, as you say, a remarkable horse, a prodigious horse, although, as you very justly observe, of a suspicious and untraceable character. Let him be mine, however," he added after a pause. "Perhaps a rider like Frederick of Metzengerstein may tame even the devil from the stable of Berlifitzing." "You are mistaken, my lord. The horse, as I think you mentioned, is not from the stables of the Count. If such had been the case, we know our duty better than to bring him into the presence of a noble of your family." "True," observed the baron dryly, and at that instant a page of the bedchamber came from the palace with a heightened color and a precipitate step. He whispered into his master's ear an account of the sudden disappearance of a small portion of the tapestry in an apartment which he designated, and entering at the same time into particulars of a minute and circumstantial character. But from the loud tone of voice in which these latter were communicated, nothing escaped to gratify the excited curiosity of the equerries. The young Frederick, during the conference, seemed agitated by a variety of emotions. He soon, however, recovered his composure, and an expression of determined malignancy settled upon his countenance, as he gave peremptory orders that the apartment in question should be immediately locked up, and the key placed in his own possession. "Have you heard of the unhappy death of the old hunter Berlifitzing?" said one of these vassals to the baron, as after the departure of the page, the huge steed which that nobleman had adopted of his own belonged to anchor vetted with redoubled fury down the long avenue, which extended from the palace to the stables of Metzengerstein. "No," said the baron, turning abruptly towards the speaker. "Dead, say you? It is indeed true, my lord, and to a noble of your name will be, I imagine, no unwelcome intelligence." A rapid smile shot over the countenance of the listener. "How died he?" "In his rash exertions to rescue a favorite portion of his hunting stud, he has himself perished miserably in the flames." "Indeed," ejaculated the baron, as if slowly and deliberately impressed with the truth of some exciting idea. "Indeed," repeated the vassal. "Shocking," said the youth calmly, and turned quietly into the palace. From this date a marked alteration took place in the outward manner of the dissolute young Baron Frederick von Metzengerstein. Indeed, his behavior disappointed every expectation, and proved little in accordance with the view of many manoeuvring mamma, while his habits and manners, still less than formerly, offered anything congenial with those of the neighboring aristocracy. He was never to be seen beyond the limits of his own domain, and in his wide and social world was utterly companionless, unless indeed that natural impatience and fairly coloured horse, which he henceforward continually bestrode, had any mysterious right to the title of his friend. Numerous invitations on the part of the neighbourhood for a long time, however, periodically came in. "Will the baron honour our festival with his presence? Will the baron join us in a hunting of the boar? Metzengerstein does not hunt. Metzengerstein will not attend," were the hearty and laconic answers. These repeated insults were not to be endured by the imperious nobility, so the invitation became less cordial, less frequent. In time they ceased altogether. The widow of the silly explosion of hereditary peak, and merely prove how singularly unmeaning our sayings are apt to become when we desire to be unusually energetic. The charitable nevertheless attributed the alteration in the conduct of the young nobleman to the natural sorrow of a son for the untimely loss of his parents, forgetting, however, his atrocious and reckless behavior during the short period immediately succeeding the bereavement. Some there were indeed who suggested to an hearty idea of self-consequence and dignity. Others again, among them may be mentioned the family physician, did not hesitate in speaking of morbid melancholy and hereditary ill health, while dark hints of a more equivocal nature were current among the multitude. Indeed, the Baron's perverse attachment to his lately acquired charger, an attachment which seemed to attain new strength from every fresh example of the animal's ferocious and demon-like propensities, at length became in the eyes of all reasonable men a hideous and unnatural fervor. In the glare of noon, at the dead hour of night, in sickness or in health, in calm or in tempest, the young Wittgenstein seemed riveted to the saddle of the colossal horse, whose intractable audacities so well accorded with his own spirit. There were circumstances, moreover, which, coupled with late events, gave an unearthly and portentous character to the mania of the rider and to the capabilities of the steed. The space passed over in a single leap had been accurately measured and was found to exceed by an astonishing difference the wildest expectation of the most imaginative. The Baron, besides, had no particular name for the animal, although all the rest in his collection were distinguished by characteristic appellation. His stable, too, was appointed at a distance from the rest, and with regard to grooming and other necessary offices, none but the owner in person had ventured to officiate or even to enter the enclosure of the door's particular stall. It was also to be observed that although the 3 grooms who had caught the steal as they fled from the conflagration at Berlifitzing had succeeded in arresting his course by means of a chain bridle and noose, yet none of them 3 could with any certainty affirm that he had, during that dangerous struggle, or at any period thereafter, actually placed his hand upon the body of the beast. Instances of the peculiar intelligence in the manner of a noble and high-spirited horse are not to be supposed capable of exciting unreasonable attention, but there were certain circumstances which intruded themselves by force upon the most sceptical and phlegmatic, and it is said that there were times when the animals caused the gaping crowd who stood around to recoil in horror from the deep and impressive meaning of this terrible stump, times when the young Wittgenstein turned pale and shrunk away from the rapid and searching expression of his human-looking eye. Among all the retinue of the Baron, however, none were found to top the ardor of the extraordinary affection which existed on the part of the young nobleman for the fiery qualities of this horse, at least none but an insignificant and misshapen little page, whose deformities were in everybody's ways, and whose opinion were of the least possible importance. He, if his ideas are worth mentioning at all, had the effrontery to assert that his master never vaulted in the saddle without an unaccountable and almost imperceptible shudder, and that upon his return from a very long-continued and habitual ride, an expression of triumphant malignity distorted every muscle in his countenance. One tempestuous night, Wittgenstein, awaking from a heavy slumber, descended like a maniac from his chamber, and mounting in hot haste, bounded away into the mazes of the forest. An occurrence so common attracted no particular attention, but his return was looked for with intense anxiety on the part of his domestics, when after some hours' absence, the stupendous and magnificent battlements of the palace Wittgenstein were discovered crackling and rockling to their very foundation, under the influence of a dense and livid mass of its ungovernable fire. As the flames were first seen, had already made so terrible a progress that all efforts to save any portion of the building were evidently futile. The astonished neighborhood stood idly around in silent if not pathetic wonder, but a new and fearful object soon riveted the attention of the multitude and proved how much more intense is the walks which led from the forest to the main entrance of the palace met Sankerstein, a steed-bearing and unbonneted and disordered rider, was seen leaping with an impetuosity which outstripped the very demon of the Tempest. The career of the horseman went indisputably on his own part, uncontrollable. The agony of his contents, the compulsive struggle of his frame, gave evidence of superhuman exertion, but no sound, save a solitary shriek, escaped from his lacerated lips, which were bitten through and through in the intensity of terror. One instant, and the clattering of hoofs resounded sharply and shrilly above the roaring of the flames, and the shrieking of the winds. Another, and clearing at a single plunge the gateway and the moat, the steed bounded far up the tottering staircases of the palace, and with its rider disappeared amid a whirlwind of chaotic fire. The fury of the tempest immediately died away, and a dead calm suddenly succeeded. A white flame still enveloped the building like a shroud, and streaming far away into the quiet atmosphere, shot forth a glare of preternatural light, while a cloud of smoke settled heavily over the battlements in the distinct colossal figure of a horse. This was hard to read and not to understand mostly. In fact, I did not understand. Well, maybe yeah, but not completely. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, which was longer than usual. I'm sorry for the background noises and for my voice because I have a cold. I hope you didn't hear it. But yeah. So maybe I'll read other stories from this book if you're interested. I need to improve my English knowledge to enjoy them, because as right now it's kind of doesn't make sense to read if you don't understand, I think. So yeah, I'll get even better at English. Oh, my belly is making noises. I'll get even better in English, so I'll understand it. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe.